When was the last time you took a close look at a coin? I bet it's been a while, but back in Roman times that will have been different, because besides being a means of pay, coins were also being used by the state or local authorities to spread messages, short and powerful messages, reaching a great audience, almost like an ancient tweet. So in this video we'll take a look at how coins changed in both appearance and function throughout the ages. But before we do so, I have an important announcement about this channel. Starting this YouTube channel has been dominating our lives for the past 3 years, and we have sacrificed so much of our social life and even career for it. For example, this entire weekend will be a weekend of research and script writing, which takes on average about 40 to 80 hours, to give an example of just one of the returning chores involved in making such documentaries. But getting the reception like we have, we know it's all gonna be worth it. Because don't think this is it. And this channel is done evolving and improving. We're still only starting out. And we feel like we have what it takes to really make this channel into the best and most spectacular historic YouTube channel out there. But there's still a final leap to make to get to a real professional level, both in terms of quality and in terms of the type of content we create. But to make this last jump, we do need your support, as the profits from this channel have been next to nothing until now. So, we have launched a Patreon channel earlier this week, meant as a stable source of income to hopefully cover the continuous costs of running this channel. For the real epic stuff though, we're gonna launch a Kickstarter in May. And the Kickstarter will be aimed at financing the stuff history geeks like us dream of. Think of slow motion weapon tests, functioning Roman artillery, detailed on-site documentaries on, for example, Hadrian's Wall or the siege of Masada in Israel. Really, whatever the budget allows us to do, we will do. And the best part is, you can decide what it is we should do. Because our Patreon members and Kickstarter backers will get to decide. The Kickstarter page is live as a pre-launch page now, meaning there's just a single button that will register you to be notified on launch. And if you consider backing us, please make use of this function, because it will inform us about the number of likely backers, which is important to us, because we will be creating all sorts of cool physical rewards to give to the backers. Now, that's all. Please consider supporting us, as we really do need it. Thank you. And now let's get back to ancient money. In the humble beginnings, Rome was a rather primitive and self-contained state, with little need to trade with the world. Compared to the Greek city-states of the 4th and 5th centuries BC, Rome's monetary system was crude at best. In this period, the Romans used rough lumps of bronze as money, which are valued according to weight. There were no marks of value, nor was there a state-regulated standardization. As guidelines for the worth of money, or rather bronze, people had standard prices for animals, like 100 pounds for an ox, or 10 pounds for a sheep. By the late 4th century BC, the Romans introduced a more worked type of money, being bars of bronze. And these bars were strongly connected to animals, because to give people an idea of how much these bars were worth, they depicted animals on them, for example an ox, so that you knew that that amount of bronze equaled the value of an ox. But these bars were quite big, and therefore not suited for, let's say, buying a cup of wine at the local bar, so they were reserved for larger transactions. We see a change during the 3rd century BC, by which time Rome's dominance spreads into the south of Italy, back then known as Magna Graecia, or Greater Greece, so named because this area had a lot of cities that were founded by Greek colonists. These city-states were heavily influenced by the Greek motherland and were already used to a monetary system based on coins. In the beginning of the 3rd century, when Rome begins to conquer the south, Rome introduces its own coin system. Like the bronze bars, these early Roman coins were still very large, weighing around 400 grams apiece. Later in the same century though, the 17-year war with Carthage with its famous general Hannibal brings Rome its greatest existential crisis,
bringing the state to the edge of bankruptcy. In need of money, Rome decreases the silver and bronze content of its coins, making them cheaper to make, but also less valuable. By the end of the century, the huge bronze coin had shrunk from 400 to just 50 grams, making it much less valuable, but thereby much more usable in daily life. With that, in 211 BC, Rome also introduced 3 new silver coins: the denarius, the quinarius, and the sestertius. The last two were seldomly made, so that the silver denarius and the bronze, later copper os, became the motor oil of the Roman economy. Rome now finally had a functioning monetary system that was up to par with other powers of the time. Julius Caesar was the first person to have an accurate portrait of himself depicted on his coins. Caesar had gained enough control over the institute responsible for minting coins in Rome, and for the first time in history, coin engravers worked with the features of a living man. A barrier had been broken, and his political rivals soon followed, minting coins on their own behalf in the provinces. A famous example is a coin by Brutus's hand, with his head on one side and the cap of liberty and 2 daggers on the other side, commemorating the assassination of Julius Caesar. With the empire growing ever larger, communication was becoming increasingly difficult. Especially in times of political change and competition over power, reaching and influencing the people was more important than ever. As coins traveled around the empire and were used and seen by virtually each and every single one of the inhabitants of the empire, coins were the ultimate medium to spread a message, not from person to person, but from the emperor to the people. Because with Augustus, emperors took control of the minting of silver and gold coins, while the bronze coinage authority remains with the Senate, clearly evidenced on asses by the letters SC, meaning Senatu Consulto, by resolution of the Senate. The bronze or copper as could be produced locally, and so was used to spread local messages. For example, after the Batavian revolt in 69 AD, coins were being struck to celebrate the victory over the rebelling Batavians. These coins were only distributed in the 2 provinces where the revolt had actually raged, Germania Inferior and Germania Superior, because this was probably something that would not ring a bell to inhabitants of the eastern part of the empire. The silver denarii coins were used to spread messages which were meant for everybody to see, not just a specific audience in a specific region. So how did a freshly struck denarius reach all corners of the empire? Of course through trade, but also through a practice that came to be in the early empire, a one-time sum of money from emperors to soldiers whenever a new emperor took office, called a donativum, giving us the word donation. What it came down to, simply put, was that the emperor bought the loyalty of the army. Despite the questionable nature of the practice, it was a great way for new money to travel to all corners of the empire and spread the message that a new emperor had taken over the throne.
But of course, coins have 2 sides, and only one was taken by the portrait of the emperor, so the other could be used for another message. And no decent dictator misses out on the opportunity to influence the people. This blank spot on a coin might seem like nothing to us nowadays, but you have to remember that back then information spread mostly by word of mouth. And with an empire as big as the Roman, both the trustworthiness of messages and speed at which they spread was poor. So the power of a coin as a way to spread a message at high speed and to each and every corner of the empire cannot be underestimated. So, what kind of message would an emperor want to convey to the people? Something in his own interest, first and foremost, but what exactly depended on the circumstances of his reign and his concerns thereabout. There's a couple of very clear types of messages that apply to almost all coins, and I'll talk you through them.
The most general purpose of a coin was to create an association between the emperor and the god. Julius Caesar, for example, had the image of Venus depicted on one side of the coin struck by him. Caesar always claimed to be a descendant of this goddess. By showing his connection with Venus, he both strengthened his own image and justified his actions, because he was descendant of a god. But also without such a strong claim to direct divine heritage, emperors often paired themselves with a god on the other side of a coin. A way to say, quite literally, I am backed by this god. My rule is sanctioned or favored by this god. The specific god could be one traditionally associated with his family, or picked by the emperor himself, to strengthen a certain aspect of his character or rule. For emperors who wanted a somewhat more martial image, they paired themselves with the god of war, Mars, for example.
Some emperors went way further than just creating some sort of association with a certain god. They didn't just depict one on the other side of the coin, but went as far to identify themselves with a god. The first to do it was Nero, egoistic as he was. He depicted himself wearing a radiant crown, the symbol of the sun god Sol. Another notorious Roman emperor who did such a thing was Commodus, known to the broader public because of the movie Gladiator. He had himself depicted wearing a lion's pelt, and the lion's pelt was an unmistakable attribute of Hercules, and recognized as such by all Romans and Greeks.
A more realistic and appropriate way to promote oneself was to show off one's achievements. This could be as straightforward as mentioning the amount of times you served a certain prestigious office, like consul, written as COS, followed by the number of times served, or the highest priest in Rome, Pontifex Maximus, written as PM. Other powers and titles were also often displayed for the same purpose. Here we can see Emperor Nerva boasting his Tribuniciae Potestas, written in short as TRP, meaning Nerva had the power of a tribune, another public office. Lastly, on this same coin, we have PP, which means Pater Patriae, father of the fatherland. On the side of the coin with the portrait of Nerva, we also see some titles. We see the letters IMP, which is short for Imperator, meaning triumphant general. Then, that is followed by Nerva's name, and CAESAVG, which stands for Caesar Augustus. These are honorary titles given to pretty much every emperor after Augustus. Some of these titles were quite meaningless, but still used because it represented old Roman traditions and carried authority. More impressive and tangible achievements were also often displayed on coins, like public buildings built by the emperor, or changes in taxes or grain handouts, all things that profited the people and made the emperor more popular. But beyond such clear self-promotion, there could be another layer of influencing going on. We'll look at a coin of Emperor Vespasian to explain this.
Emperor Vespasian came to rule at the time of the Batavian Revolt, but never minted any coins celebrating the suppression of the Batavian Revolt. Instead, he had many coins issued celebrating his victory over the rebelling Jewish population in the east, ending with the capture of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Here we have such a coin, and as you can see, there's a woman symbolizing Judea, modern-day Israel, sitting down, with above her a military standard. Beneath her we read Judea in Latin. This way, Vespasian was telling the people that Judea, which had risen up against Rome, had been subjugated by military force and was now once again under Roman rule. This in itself would have been an achievement worthy of its own mint. But what made this event even more so were the circumstances of the time. Let me explain.
Vespasian had come to power in 69 AD, the so-called Year of the Four Emperors, and the same year as the Batavian Revolt. This was the year right after the suicide of Emperor Nero, who had no successor to take over the throne. With no successor in line, this led to a major civil war between aspiring emperors, all of whom being generals. In his turn, Vespasian overthrew the third of those emperors and became the fourth and final one. With victory being his face would now have to be struck on coins and distributed throughout the empire. What was he to depict on his coins? Some of his direct predecessors had minted coins with the goddess Victoria, clearly celebrating their own victory over the previous emperor. But unlike them, Vespasian was a working class man with a feel for the common people like no emperor before him. So instead of showing off his own personal victory, he chose to show his victory over the rebelling Jewish people in a war that had lasted for 4 years. This was an ingenious move, as it served multiple, subtle purposes. First of all, it showed the people his ethics and modesty, not celebrating his personal victory, but rather the one in service of the state. Second of all, it showed that he was an accomplished general, and in that sense could be fit to rule. Lastly, it diverted attention away from his questionable claim to the throne, which up until Nero had always been a mix of heritage and divine favor. All of it helped to build an image of him as an honest and competent man, with no desire for godly associations or personal fame and glory, but purely the well-being of the state.
The lack of heirs or appointed successors had proven to be disastrous for Emperor Nero, as well as for the internal peace of the Roman Empire because of the civil war that followed. And not only was it a threat to the dynasty of the emperor, it could also be a threat to his own and his family's life, because a vulnerable emperor is more likely to be assassinated or overthrown. So to show the public a clear successor or a strong family which could produce a successor was important on many levels.
And this is something that is clearly seen on coins. Rome's first emperor, Emperor Augustus, already understood this. He himself did not have a male heir, only a daughter Julia. To secure his lineage, he adopted his own 2 grandsons, being the sons of his daughter and his right-hand man Agrippa. By portraying these 2 young boys on coins, Augustus was making it clear to the public that he had established 2 possible heirs. This way, there could be no confusion as to how Rome would be ruled after his passing away, preventing political and social unrest or maybe even civil war.
Emperors had come to recognize and take full advantage of the potential of coins as a way of communication. By sending out the right message at the right time, they influenced the people's perception, strengthening their grip on power and paving the way for their successor. A form of early state propaganda, you could say. Well, that's it for now. We hope you enjoyed this video, and the next time you'll pay with coins, you think of Rome.